morning students. I wish you all are doing well in your life. Keep studying hard, keep working hard like that. This side here Priyanka, your biology mentor, to help you with your queries regarding biology. So students, in our previous classes we had discussed about the variety of plants, that is our plant kingdom, which is very complex, and we had studied the various groups of plants within our plant kingdom, and those were algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperm and angiosperms. All those come under our plant kingdom, and generally the plant kingdom is divided into two categories, basically two categories. And what are they? Let's briefly recall what we had studied in our previous classes. So students, in our previous classes we had studied that plant kingdom, the diverse plant kingdom, is divided into mostly two categories. The diverse plant kingdom is divided into mostly two categories. One is your cryptogams and another is your phanerogams, Okay, cryptogams, as you know, a word is hidden there, that is crypto. Crypto means what is that? Crypto means what? Crypto means hidden. So cryptogams means the plants which have hidden sex organs, the plants which bear hidden sex organs. And phanerogams means completely the opposite of cryptogams, that means the plants which have visible sex organs, And these cryptogams is otherwise called as flowering plants, as you know. The cryptogams is otherwise called as non-flowering plants, as you know. These cryptogams is otherwise called as non-flowering plants. And phanerogams is otherwise called as flowering plants. And which plants or which groups come under cryptogams? We had already studied that. Those are your algae, your bryophytes and your pteridophytes. Those are your algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes. Those are your algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, which come under your cryptogams category. And which groups or which group of plants they come under your phanerogams? They are your gymnosperms and angiosperms. Angiosperms. Students, these phanerogams is otherwise also called as your what? We had studied those plants which have seed bearing plants. They are otherwise called as your spermatophytes. Okay, sperma in botany, sperma means your seed. Okay, and phyta refers to plants according to Greek word. Okay, so phanerogams is otherwise called your spermatophytes. It means they bear seeds. Okay, that's why they are called as your seed bearing plants or spermatophytes. Okay, all these things we had studied in our previous class, and we had also elaborately studied each and every group of algae. That is, as we know, what are algae? First let's discuss what is algae. Algae are generally your thallophytes. Thallophytes means their body type or their structure is very simple. They have very simple structure, and algae, as you know, they are eukaryotic organisms. Eukaryotic means what? They have well developed system, not in like as your prokaryotes. As you know, in prokaryotes they have very simple structure. They have very primitive as well as ancient structure. Their nucleus is not well developed, and in that cell, in that prokaryotic cells, membrane bound organelles is not found. But in eukaryotic system, eukaryotic cell, we can say that it has a very well developed nucleus. Nucleus has nucleoplasm, nuclear membrane, a covering envelope, as well as chromosome, as well as nucleolus within the nucleus. It means eukaryotic system has well developed or well defined nucleus, as well as eukaryotic system has your membrane bound organelles present. It means it is comparatively it is very well developed than your prokaryotic system. So algae also come under your eukaryotic category. As we had studied in our 5 kingdom system of classification, only one group, only one kingdom we had studied, that only one kingdom is our prokaryotic, and those were our Monera, kingdom Monera. Kingdom Monera, the groups or the examples which we saw in the kingdom Monera, that the members of the kingdom Monera, they are prokaryotic as well as unicellular, and rest of the kingdom we had studied, they are come under your eukaryotic categories. So algae, it is also a plant. These groups, it is also a plant and they have eukaryotic system. So algae is eukaryotic, but it is simple, okay, simple. Their body type is very simple. And when I will tell you about to imagining a plant, okay, when I will tell you that students imagine a plant, definitely you will imagine their different organs, their different vegetative organs. You might imagine their leaf, you might imagine their stem, their flowers, their roots. When I will tell you to imagine a plant, then definitely you will imagine a structure like this, okay. Definitely you will imagine a plant structure like this. A plant which have stem, which have leaves, which have roots, you will definitely imagine their reproductive as well as vegetative organs. It means you can easily identify a plant's different parts. But in algae, you will not be able to distinguish their each and every parts. But in algae, you will not be able to distinguish their each and every vegetative or reproductive parts, because they are microscopic, because they are unicellular. If they are multicellular also, they have very thallus-like structure. Their structure is thallus-like. That's why you will not be able to distinguish, or you will not be able to differentiate their roots, stems as well as leaves. That's why algae has a structure called thalloid structure. Algae has a structure called thalloid structure or thallus-like structure. It means algae's roots, stems and leaves that cannot be easily identified. That's why they are called thallus organisms or thalloid organisms, or algae are otherwise called as thallophytes. Thallophyte means thallo represents your thallus and phyta represents your plants. Okay, that's why algae is otherwise called as your thallophytes. Okay, and we had also studied about their habitat, that algae, they belong to aquatic habitat. Okay, they are aquatic organisms. Their main habitat is aquatic habitat. They are generally found in aquatic habitat, and aquatic habitat that can be again differentiated or again divided into two categories: your freshwater habitat as well as your marine habitat. Freshwater doesn't mean that the water which is drinkable. Freshwater means which water that is not salty. Okay, as like marine water, you know that marine water means salty water, okay, salt water, but fresh water means it is not salty, okay. And even fresh habitat or fresh water habitat, that can also be divided into two categories: your flowing water habitat as well as our stagnant, the habitat that is water habitat that is stagnant, and the flowing water habitat that belong to your rivers, okay, lakes, and your stagnant habitat is your pond, okay. And according to that habitat, different types of or different species of algae also found, okay. And in their structure there is also some modifications. For example, if an algae is found in a flowing water habitat or flowing water currents, then there's some of their structures that might be well developed, some of their structures that might be modified to hold fast, so that they can attach to a substratum, so that they can attach to a surface, okay, and stick there, okay. For example, your Odogonium. In Odogonium we have also seen that they have a modified structure which is hold fast. All these things we had studied in our previous classes, and generally scientists, they divided the algae according to their pigmentation as well as stored food material. They divided algae into 3 categories according to their pigmentation as well as reserve food and other cell details, and seeing other cell details. And they divided algae into generally 3 categories. What are they? They generally divided algae into 3 categories according to their pigmentation, reserve food material as well as looking other cell details. Algae is divided into generally 3 categories. One is your chlorophyceae, 3 categories or 3 classes. Algae is generally divided into 3 classes according to their pigmentation, reserve food material and looking on other cell details. For example, your chlorophyceae, phaeophyceae and rhodophyceae. What I said? I said that algae is divided into 3 classes according to their cell details, according to their pigmentation as well as reserve food material. They are divided into 3 classes. Okay. And one class is your chlorophyceae, which is otherwise called as green algae, Second one is your phaeophyceae, which is otherwise called as your brown algae, and third is your rhodophyceae, which is otherwise called as red algae. In green algae, we saw that they are generally green, or they look or they appear grass green in color because of the pigment present within their cells, that is chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, for which the green algae or the members of the chlorophyceae, they appear green in color. Some members of the or some examples of the chlorophyceae are, for example, your volvox, for example, the unicellular motile alga, your like Chlamydomonas, colonial algae, that is your volvox, for example, your Spirogyra, for example, your Zygnema. All these algae that I told you, that is the members of the chlorophyceae, they come under your green algae. Okay. They appear green in color because of the certain pigment system, that is chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. In chlorophyceae, we studied about their difference, about their different pigment system, about their cell details, and we saw that species to species they differ in their morphology. And we had also studied that in their cell wall, apart from the cellulose, as they are plants, then definitely they have cellulose in their cell wall. As like in bacteria, we had studied the cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. As like in fungi, we studied that their cell wall is made up of chitin. Just like in green algae or in total algae, we say their cell wall is made up of cellulose as they are plants. But in chlorophyceae, we saw apart from the cellulose, in their outer wall, we see pectin as their another component of the cell wall. And their reserve food material is starch and oil droplets. Now we will study about phaeophyceae, the brown algae. Now we will study about phaeophyceae, the brown algae. As the name suggests, phaeophyceae, it is one of the class of the important class of the algae. The members of the phaeophyceae or brown algae are found primarily in marine habitats. We had studied the habitat initially. Okay. Algae's habitat initially, and we studied that the habitat, as their aquatic organisms, the aquatic habitat they might also differ. Okay. For example, the habitat, okay, the aquatic habitat, they also differ, like your freshwater habitat, and your marine habitat, Fresh water doesn't mean the water which is drinkable. Fresh water doesn't mean that the water is drinkable. Fresh water means the water that is not salty. In marine habitat, marine water is your salt water. Okay. In freshwater habitat, it can also be differentiated into stagnant as well as flowing water. Stagnant as well as flowing water. Flowing water example is your river. Stagnant water example is your pond. And marine habitat, its example is your seas, oceans. Example is your sea, oceans. Okay. These are come under your marine habitat. And generally in freshwater habitat, we generally see the members of chlorophyce, green algae, and some of the members of the red algae and some of the members of the brown algae that might also seen. But generally in marine habitat, the members of the chlorophyce and rhodophyce are mostly seen. So the brown algae are primarily found in your marine habitat. Example in your seas or oceans. Example in your seas or oceans. They show great variation in their size and form. They show great variation in their size and form. So size means the cell can be divided into two types according to their cell count or cell size. That might be unicellular or that might be multicellular. So generally brown algae, they grow very large in the sea or oceans accumulating food. There are also some algae who grow meters and meters by accumulating the food inside the oceans. And it is also seen that inside the ocean there is large marine algae are found. For example, your kelps. Okay, they are multicellular brown algae and they grow great variation and they grow in large size inside the oceans. They range from simple branched filamentous forms, example your ectocarpus, to profusely branched forms as represented by kelps. Profusely branched means, okay, a number of branched, they are fused together. It means profusely branched. So they range from simple branched filamentous forms, example simple है परे, filamentous form भी है परे. Filamentous means, for example, filamentous माने कौन? Spirogyra जमते को आई थिला. As I had studied you that Spirogyra रा गोटे example नहीं जाओ, गोटे Spirogyra रा गोटे example नहीं जाओ. Spirogyra रा गोटे example नेले कौन जाऊँ? तार each cell, each cell they look like filament. That's why the algae is otherwise called as filamentous algae. So in brown algae also, just like in ectocarpus, we can also see the filamentous forms. In green algae, we had studied different forms of algae. For example, your colonial form, for example, in your solitary form, for example, your motile form, non-motile form, different types of or different forms of algae we studied in green algae. So in brown algae also, there are also different forms of algae. Okay, for example, your filamentous form, for example, your profusely branched forms, for example, your kelps. Okay, the kelps or the brown algae, they grow sometimes meters to meters, they grow around 100 meters in the height. Okay, so माने बेले बेले कौन करंती समुद्र भितरे पूरा बहुत मीटर टू मीटर से माने कौन करंती ना हाइट रे ग्रो करी जानती फूड एक्वायर करिकी. ओके, कहीं ना कंडीशन सुइटेबल थाए बिकॉज देयर कंडीशन वाज ऑलवेज सुइटेबल देयर एंड द हैबिटेट इज सुइटेबल, दैट्स व्हाई दे ग्रो हाइट और दे ग्रो हाई इन साइज. ओके, Phaeophyce possess pigments as like we had studied that green algae possess the pigment that is chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. That's why they appear grass green in color. In Phaeophyce also there are certain pigments, that's why they appear brown in color. It doesn't mean that they do not have chlorophyll in their cell. They do have chlorophyll in their cell, that's why they can perform photosynthesis. But apart from that, there are also certain pigments for which the brown algae they appear brown in color, and the dominant pigment for which they appear brown in color is your fucoxanthin. Fucoxanthin. Fucoxanthin is the dominant brown pigment for which the brown algae they appear brown in color. And apart from that, there are also other pigments. Those were your chlorophyll A, those are your chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, carotenoids and xanthophylls. Okay. and by the help of chlorophyll A and chlorophyll, I already said that they have a dominant pigment fucoxanthin, that's why they appear brown in color. Okay, it doesn't mean that they do not have chlorophyll. If they do not have chlorophyll, then how will they do, or how will they perform photosynthesis? So they have already the pigment chlorophyll. They have variety of pigments: chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, carotenoid, xanthophyll, fucoxanthin. Okay, I am giving you a chart or a table so that you will easily recall, or so that you will easily memorize the different pigments of the different algae, different members of different algae. For example, your chlorophyceae, rhodophyceae, brown algae. Okay, I am giving you a chart. You memorize that chart and you will easily recall all the pigments. The three classes of algae are: one is your chlorophyceae, one is your phaeophyceae, and another is your rhodophyceae. Okay, rhodophyceae. Okay, and the pigments which we saw in their body, okay, they are chlorophyll. In chlorophyceae, it is chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. In phaeophyceae, it is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, as well as in phaeophyceae, sorry, it is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and the dominant pigment, it is fucoxanthin. Fucoxanthin. Okay. In rhodophyceae, it is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll D, and the dominant pigment is phycoerythrin. Phycoerythrin. It means chlorophyll A is present in all the algae. You have to recall only the B, C, D. Okay, chlorophyll B for chlorophyceae, chlorophyll C for phaeophyceae, and chlorophyll D for your rhodophyceae. And apart from that, you have to recall this, or you have to memorize this. Thus, phaeophyceae have fucoxanthin and rhodophyceae have phycoerythrin. Okay, you have to memorize this, that phaeophyceae has the pigment fucoxanthin and rhodophyceae has the pigment phycoerythrin. You have to memorize this. Okay. So the pigments which is present in the brown algae, they are the chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, beta carotenoids or carotenoids, and xanthophyll. As well as another pigment is also present, another dominant pigment is also present, which is your fucoxanthin. They vary in color from olive green to various shades of brown depending upon the amount of xanthophyll pigment, fucoxanthin present in them. Okay, I already told you that because of the pigment fucoxanthin, they appear brown in color. Food is stored as complex carbohydrates in the form of laminarin or mannitol. As I had already told you, in green algae, the food is stored in the form of starch and oil droplets. Okay, as well as in some algae, the food is also stored in pyrenoids. Pyrenoids are the micro or the subcellular micro compartments where starch as well as proteinaceous forms is present in the center, surrounded by starch. And in brown algae, the reserve food material or the stored form of the food is laminarian starch or mannitol. Okay. The vegetative cells have a cellulosic wall. As they are plants, so their cell wall is made up of cellulose, and apart from cellulose, their outer wall is made up of algin. For example, let's consider it is a brown algae. Okay, and definitely as it is a plant, so their cell wall is made up of cellulose. Their cell wall is made up of cellulose. As it is a plant, so we had studied in the 5 kingdom system of classification that plants cell wall is made up of cellulose, as like bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan, as like fungal cell wall is made up of chitin. So as it is algae, as it is plant, so their cell wall is made up of cellulose. And apart from cellulose, there is another component outer to the cell wall, that is algin. That is algin. Let's take brown in color. Algin. Apart from cellulose, there is another component or another structure is found, another component is found around or outer to the cell wall, that is algin. They usually are covered on the outside by a gelatinous coating called algin. Apart from cellulose, okay, they usually covered on the outside by a gelatinous coating called algin. Clear? So, in green algae, we saw that in green algae they have cellulose and the outer coating is your pectin. And in brown algae, we saw that they have cellulose and the outer coating is your algin. The protoplast contains plastids, vacuole, nucleus. What are plastids? Plastids are colorful organelles, and plastids even distinguished or differentiated into three categories like chromoplast, leucoplast, chloroplast. So, they do have plastids, okay, they do have chloroplast, they do have green pigment as well as other pigments, they do have vacuole for storage purpose, and they do have a well defined nucleus as they are eukaryotic organisms. Next, the plant body is usually attached to the substratum by a holdfast and has a stalk, stipe and leaf like photosynthetic organ, the frond. You might be confusing because these words might be new for yourselves, okay, for you, okay, these words they might be new for you, okay. Let us take an example of a phaeophyce, that is your fucus. Let us take an example of a phaeophyce, that is fucus, okay. Okay, let us consider that it is fucus, and you can see that it is a brown algae, okay, and the total plant body, it can be differentiated into three types. The total plant body, it can be differentiated into three types. One is your holdfast and second one is your stipe and third one is your frond. In phaeophyce, or take an example of fucus, okay, in phaeophyce or take an example of your fucus, it is one type of brown algae. Generally, their plant body is differentiated or divided into generally three parts. One is the attachment, where the plant is attached to the substratum, is your holdfast. Holdfast is a structure which helps the plant for attaching to a surface, okay, or to a plant. Sometimes there are also plants which are seen as epiphytes. Sometimes there are also plants which are seen as epiphytes. Epi means what? Epi means upper area and phyte represent your plants. There are also some plants which grow upon or which are attached to the another plants and grow there. They are otherwise called as epiphytes, okay. So, one is your holdfast, and holdfast, how holdfast this structure helps the plants? This structure helps the plants in attaching to a surface. And second one is your stipe. Stipe is the area or stipe is the surface or the structure which is common to the holdfast as well as to the frond, which is extended from the holdfast to the frond. Stipe is a structure, okay, stipe is a structure which is extended from the holdfast to the frond area, okay. And what are fronds? What are fronds? The third part is the frond. And what are fronds? Fronds are your simple, fronds are your slippery structures. When you take it in your hand, you will see that it has a very slippery area, it has a very slippery substance because of the gel-like structure or because of the mucilage structure or gelatinous structure. In frond, you will see some mucilage structures are present, mucilage structures are present. That is why they are very slippery in nature, okay. When you take it in your hand, you can feel that it has very slippery area, okay. And apart from that, in fucus, you can see some gas bladders are present, some gas bladders or air bladders are also present. Gas bladders or air bladders are also present. And how do the gas bladders or air bladders they help the plants? They help in flotation. Generally, they help the plants in flotation. And apart from that, what you will see in a brown algae, okay, you can see that it is branched. For example, you have seen the Chlamydomonas, for example, you have seen the volvox structure, they are not branched. But in brown algae, you can see that it is a branched structure. You can easily see the branches here. It has a branch structure. Let's come into their reproduction. Brown algae, they reproduce 3 ways. Okay, brown algae reproduce 3 ways. 3 ways. Okay, one is vegetative, asexual, and another is sexual. Vegetative, asexual and sexual. Vegetative process, they are carried out by the fragmentation process, and asexual by spores and sexual by the fusion of the gametes.